And welcome back to this extremely important September 3rd, Tuesday edition of INFOWARS Nightly News. Rush Limbaugh, undoubtedly the largest media presence in the United States with 20+ million listeners a week. Love him or hate him, he's about as big as it gets on the media landscape, came out today and said that the evidence is pointing towards a false flag staged terror attack by the al-Qaeda forces so that the Obama administration and NATO have a pretext to come in and militarily back them up with air power. This is incredible because Rush Limbaugh joins Pat Buchanan, Ron Paul, Rand Paul, and of course myself and many others, Dr. Jerome Corsi of WorldNet Daily, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts of the Treasury Department in the Reagan administration, and Vladimir Putin of Russia, and many of the members of the British Parliament. This is amazing. In saying that the evidence is overwhelming that the Syrian rebels staged the chemical attacks. There's even videos that we've been covering the last week and a half since this tragedy happened, where the rebels are loading the chemical weapons and screaming Allah Akbar as they fire them. The Syrian rebels were caught earlier this year and last year in Turkey with chemical weapons they were trying to smuggle across the border. You're like, well, if Turkey's backing the rebels, why would they bust them? Because the general police and military aren't involved in staging a chemical attack. They just know people are trying to sneak across the border with a weapon. They check them, and then it gets covered up. So we know, ladies and gentlemen, that all evidence points towards this, and they have the motive. Why would Assad, if he's told by Obama, oh, by the way, if there's a chemical attack out of the blue, we're going to invade you? And Assad's like, I didn't do it, the rebels did it. Why would I target random civilians with this? It's against common sense. And what you've got is a 2.5-year proxy war, plus, it's almost 3 years, it'll be 3 years in December, of the West funding hundreds of millions of dollars per quarter. It's in the billions of dollars now to fund and train rebels in Jordan, in Iraq, in Turkey, in other areas, to inject them into Syria, trying to overthrow that country. And CNN calls the al-Qaeda forces blowing up churches, murdering people, activists and protesters. Just like when they tried to blow up a ship in the Suez Canal in Egypt today, they were called demonstrators. And it was like, oh, how dare the Egyptian army fire rockets at them from helicopters. And so now you have the U.S. military revolting against this. And I've told you, the people are not buying this anymore. 9% in last week's Reuters poll, 9% support this military attack Obama's trying to push. That's 91% are against it. So it's a total collapse level event. And historically, if you're an empire, but you have a somewhat moral population who isn't just completely bloodthirsty, you tell them, hey, we're going to go invade this neighbor because they attacked us. They did something. Oh, the Spanish blew up the Maine to get us into the war 1898. Turned out that was staged. Or the Vietnamese attacked our ships in the Gulf of Tonkin, declassified 6 years ago. That was staged. Or 1953, the coup in Iran. Turned out that was staged. This has all been declassified. People are now aware of this template that's run over and over again, not just by us. The Russian government's been caught staging stuff. The Nazis got caught staging stuff. Operation Himmler, blowing up their own military bases at Gleiwitz and other areas to then say Poland had attacked. Poland had a World War I or pre-World War I army with horses up against the Luftwaffe and Panzer tanks. They didn't start a fight. It'd be like a guy that weighs 50 pounds and can't walk starting a fight with a top, UFC fighter in their prime, or starting a fight with somebody like Mike Tyson in his prime. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so people are seeing through it. And the fact that you've got Rush Limbaugh coming out now and saying he didn't want to look at this, he couldn't believe it, but the evidence is there, is amazing. So first tonight, I wanted to look at what Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul have said. And then we're going to go to the new clip from today of Rush Limbaugh. And then I have bombshell, really scary news from our sources that is going to be breaking right about the time the show ends tonight. Dealing with nuclear weapons that were supposedly not even at the base under treaties, being brought out of mothballs and from the B-1 base in West Texas and transferred to the East Coast to be loaded on other aircraft to be deployed against Russia. This is just unprecedented. We've confirmed all the B-2 bombers stationed in Missouri last week took off for Europe and that theater, and that U.S. aircraft have been massing in the region. And Obama said Saturday in a speech, our assets are in place in his military. How creepy is that? And we have high-level Russian media sources who literally say the government is in bunkers right now and the Russians are preparing for nuclear war and have never been this freaked out, not even in the Cold War. The Russians have their fingers on the launch buttons. They've massed hundreds of thousands of troops on their border. This is incredible, ladies and gentlemen. And our government is siding with al-Qaeda. This is biblical stuff that's happening right now. Let's go ahead and go to Ron Paul just a few days ago on Neil Cavuto talking about false flag. Here it is.
I think it's a false flag. I think really, indeed. And nobody knows if indeed he was slaughtering people by the thousands, with poison gas. That's a different story, but that isn't the case.
And during the entire interview, he lays out the history of events being staged. So this idea of the self-inflicted wound, the staged event, the frame-up is becoming mainstream. And this really takes the tool of tyrants away to be able to manipulate populations with militant enthusiasm, with mob psychology, to attack whoever they want by staging events. And of course, Pat Buchanan has also done several interviews on the McLaughlin Group and with Newsmax, saying basically the same thing. Here's that clip.
I would not understand or comprehend that Bashar al-Assad, no matter how bad a man he may be, would be so stupid as to order a chemical weapons attack on civilians in his own country, when the immediate consequence of which might be that he would be at war with the United States. So this reeks of a false flag operation.
And again, you can see all these clips in full, unedited, at INFOWARS.com and PrisonPlanet.com in the report that we have put out today. They're all linked at the bottom. Rush Limbaugh suspects Obama conspired with al-Qaeda to frame Bashar al-Assad. Absolutely sensational information. And before we play this Rush Limbaugh clip, I just want to point out, this is the fall of the false flag. Because when they staged the underwear bombing, it came out immediately that the CIA had put the drugged Muttalib on the plane. When they stage other events now, it's coming out very, very quickly, even in the New York Times, that almost every provocateur event is the FBI finding a mentally ill, low IQ person and commanding them as their Islamic leader, to build a bomb, to blow up the Christmas tree display in Portland, Oregon, or whatever the case may be. People are really understanding that the establishment is staging events, provocateuring events, and opening the door for real extremists who are out there to attack us as a pretext to radically re-engineer and change our culture from an open, free society, laissez-faire, true libertarianism in the Dutch New York model, to this authoritarian Orwellian system.